Hello, everyone, and welcome to my part of Purple's Christmas Marathon. And this is going to be my stream. We're going to be answering science questions today, which means you guys have to try and challenge me, which is probably not going to be that hard because, well, if it's about lasers, I'm fine. If it's about anything else, you will probably stump me. But let's see what sort of questions there are. And brownie points to the best question. Sorry, I don't actually have any other prizes to give, but who doesn't want extra brownie points? Now, I did also mention that we will be answering science questions, and I may have more people dropping in later. But for now, I have my usual and most reliable and wonderful co-host, Jen. How are you going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, it's been nearly 8 hours, 9 hours since I last saw you.
Since we were last on the stream together.
Yeah, we
it's been a while since we've done a stream together where we've answered science questions, though. So
yes, now
this has been a while.
Yeah, yes, this actually marks just about exactly a year since I first did a live stream on my channel, because it was actually part of the Christmas live stream that I did it, and I did science questions. I'm actually using the same kind of theme from StreamYards for that one, which made things easier. It's been a bit of a hectic week. But yes, I am just going to waffle on for a minute or two to let everyone jump in. And we are coming over from Maya's channel. So for those of us who are joining us from there, or at least from previous parts of this marathon, welcome. And for those who are joining outside of that, also welcome. I hope you'll have science questions ready. And of course, look, people say there's no such thing as a stupid question. I disagree with that. There are stupid questions, but I would much rather someone ask me a stupid question than do something stupid. That's what I always tell my first year students when I'm teaching. I'm like, please, I will never get angry at a dumb question. I will get angry if you do something dumb. Well, actually, I don't get that angry because I want to know when they do something dumb so I can help them fix it before anything goes boom.
Dumb questions are educational. If you ask a dumb question and as long as the person who answers it isn't an asshole about you asking a dumb question, it's fine because you learn from that. So there's nothing wrong with a dumb question. There are wrong ways to answer a dumb question.
There's never anything wrong with a dumb question. And trust me, I have definitely answered my fair share of dumb questions.
Same, definitely.
Yes. Now, I do want to set the ground rules before we start because we may as well get into it. Now, just to make everything easy, as I said, there are a couple of ground rules. Nothing too fancy. The first one is it has to be science related. Now, you can ask me anything. It just has to be somewhat scientific. I don't care how you make it scientific. Just do it. Keep in mind that I also haven't made this stream for adults only, so just watch the language. But as I said, if it's scientific... No, you've been pretty good when on my
I already dropped in an A word, so I mean.
Oh no, I'm not worried a bit of that. I'm talking about like strings of swear words. I think most kids swear a lot more than I do.
The A word,
I don't really. Well, I don't think we'll have anyone too young here, but
it's the heavy duty words like Geof, Claire, and myself used the other nights that you.
Yeah, but that's fun. There's definitely a place for that, or a time and places for that, and I do enjoy watching those. But yes, you can ask any question. As I said, if they're scientific, what will make it easier for me to see them is to just at me. If I miss a question of yours because I don't have super chats, it's a bit hard to ask anything that not I do it anyway. Make sure you just at me again, just copy paste it. I'll eventually see it or start having a go at me in the chat and I'll try and see it. So yeah, now if anyone wants to join, you can send me a DM on Twitter, or if you're part of the Christmas Marathon, then I've already put that link there. Maybe have a few more people come over. But yes, we may as well get started. And as I said, good luck, everyone. And yes, Jen has already made a bet with me about one particular question that's going to be asked, so I am curious as to whether that'll come up. However, I think we do actually have a question, a science question. Can you mix pineapple with pizzas? Now, some people think this is a very nuanced topic. For me, the answer is very clear. No. If you put pineapple on a pizza, I would no longer call that a pizza, and you can go eat that somewhere else. Pineapples are evil. They have an enzyme that actually starts trying to digest. Yeah.
And this is the reason why it's such a controversial topic, because some people like what that enzyme does to the cheeses on the pineapple, and sensible people like Matt and myself do not. So,
yes. There are two camps. There are those who think that it's wrong to put pineapple on pizza, and then there's those who are just wrong.
Yeah.
I will die on this hill. Okay, Stool. Look, if you can do it in a scientific style, then then you can. But yes, you just have to be mildly scientific about it. But yes, by the way, I will take any scientific questions. So anything you might want to know. Just a bit of background for those of you who might be new, because I'm pretty sure that there will be a few. My background, I'm a physical chemist. I mainly deal in spectroscopy, so I deal in optics and how to find chemicals. But I have a fair background in physics and chemistry. Plus, I also like history. Actually, that's something I will add on to it. If you also have a question about history, feel free to ask. Again, I will prioritize the science ones over it, but I do love my history. So you can also phrase it that way. And if you can find one that hits both, I'll be very happy. I do like the crossover. Okay.
All right.
Now I'm just going back
to the comment.
I'm just going back to. Sorry, which one was that?
Down the bottom. The acidic.
Okay.
Pineapple is the pineapple eating you back.
Yes. See, that's what I'm talking about. The pineapple's trying to be evil, and as a result, I don't put it on pizza. Though, even though I don't really eat pineapple, I do actually have a fair bit of practice cooking them on barbecues. But then again, we're in Australia. There's not really anything that we don't know how to barbecue over here. Or for the Americans, grill, because apparently what we do isn't a proper barbecue. But we're in Australia, so
really, they don't.
I've had Americans push back at me on that one. But yeah, it's
because they don't call it a barbecue unless you're flipping burgers. Is that right, or something like that?
No, what we have is like the hot plate with is more of a grill, and then what they do is you're talking about like the pits and then the roasts with like a proper fire going, or the smokers. That I think that's more of where they come from. But again, that's something that the Americans can educate me on, because that's actually something I would like to get better at. It's just not something I get a lot of practice at. But the Australian style of barbecuing, I have had plenty of practice at that. Sorry, just saw that same one. I don't like to kink shame anyone, but I draw a hard line on pineapple pizza. Thanks for the contributions. Yes. Okay. Yes. Questions, people. Also, whilst I'm sure people are thinking of them now, I am going to say hello to everyone in the chat, because there's a few returning regulars to my channel. Hey, Geof, I know you've been here before. Claire, you're always very friendly and very welcome here. And of course, Jens, you've been here a lot of times. So I know you're secretly in the chat, though I am too. So I don't know if that counts. But hey, hello again, Jen. But to all the new ones, GIOs, and then we've got Stool. I was honored last night. I got called a certain name that is not going to be repeated here. Yes, Still's been around before. But yeah, I got the honor of getting at least a few insults from him last night, so I'm feeling really, really good. Robert X, Mage Grey Wolf, And Amiga Nuts, you're here. I know there's a few other people. Sorry if I've missed you, but if I have, welcome to everyone. Plus, I'm sure there's a couple of lurkers as well. But yeah, we've got a few people turned up. I think there might be a few other people up there. If I've missed you, feel free to say hi again in the chat. I'll say hi there. Okay.
And we have a question.
Yes, we actually have, and
it's in your field.
It might sound like it, but it's slightly outside of it. This one's actually quantum mechanics. So, Almost a Doctor, can you explain briefly how lasers are used to cool stuff down? Okay, this is actually a really cool one because you might think that, well, heat is a product of energy. Now you can think about little vibrations of atoms. The more energy they have, the more they're vibrating. When you have a gas, they're actually flying around. The more energy you put in, not only the more that they're vibrating, rotating, twisting, etc., but the more that they're actually moving the velocity. That's why when you heat something up, the pressure goes up because they're moving around more. They push more on each other when they do collide. They'll push more on the sides of the container because they hit harder. It's like having a car hit you at 10 kilometers versus 60, it's going to push more. And so you would think that if you take a laser, which is, you can't, by the way, you can't have a negative energy laser because you can't have negative energy light. All photons made up of energy. So all light has energy. You'd think a laser would pump energy in.
Well, technically, we're not sure if you can actually have negative energy.
Yeah, we're not even sure if you can have that. Although gravitational potential is still technically negative, so you can in that sense.
The Kashmir effect is a thing, and that tends to point to the fact that there is negative energy. But
yeah, but we don't. But when it comes to light, you don't. At least not in this universe. Maybe if you had a mirrored one, then yeah. But that's a different thing. However, it comes back to that thing about vibrations. We're talking about atoms moving. So laser cooling is not done on any large scale. It's generally done with single atoms and is used, I think the most common use is in quantum computers, because what they do is quantum computers are basically atoms. Several atoms suspended. Generally in laser beams, there's a few ways to do it. And again, this is getting quantum mechanics, which is not quite my area, but I at least know how you can cool the stuff down. What happens is they basically stop the vibrations because lasers can actually make you a tractor beam. I do have a video on my channel if you want to go find that one. But light has momentum, and momentum must be conserved, and you can use that basically to trap particles. So what you're doing is the laser's actually holding the atom still so it can't vibrate. And then there's some quantum mechanical weird stuff going on with the energy being transferred out elsewhere. So you're basically stopping them from moving, which is stopping them being as hot. And that's how they actually do it. So it's a bit of an odd one, but the use in quantum computers is apparently quite powerful. If you want me to go through the formulas for it, I'm sorry, that's a little outside of my area. But yeah, you basically stop them moving. You can't completely stop an atom moving because quantum mechanics doesn't like that. You can't know where anything is. So if something's not moving, then you know where it is, and quantum mechanics says no. So.
And given that you know where it is because you're holding it with the laser, you actually can't exactly know its momentum.
Well, you can't actually exactly know either one because then you get a zero in the uncertainty, and you can't, and that multiplies out, and that breaks the uncertainty principle. So, yeah, you'll always have some vibration, but you can slow them down enough to use them, which is quite cool. But yeah, I think we've got more questions. I think the next one is Claire's. Almost a Doctor, I want to know if the color of a laser actually reflects the power level or strength of said laser. This is actually a really good question because the answer is both yes and no. It's both. So there's two things you have to consider with light. That is the individual photons and then the amount of photons there are. So when we talk about laser power, we are talking about intensity. That's just brightness. That is a number of photons. That can be independent of color when generally with light, if you turn the same colored light up brighter, you're increasing the intensity. There are more photons. So it would appear brighter, and that's the sort of power level. However, the individual photons is a somewhat different story because the color will change the energy of each individual photon. So every color of light, and by color, I'm talking about the ones that we can't see as well. So it's all the way from the gamma waves all the way down at the really short end. Think about they're the most dangerous, sort of damaging ones, going gamma ray, X-ray, UV. They're the ones that can actually cause cancers because they can actually.
And at the other end, you've got your non-ionizing, which is
then you get into the visible.
You've got your microwaves and your infrareds and
lower energy. And by radio waves, we can't detect them anyway. They're not going to damage you. They're not going to heat you up. They're not really going to do much, but they're really useful for
if you had enough
communication.
Of them, and the microwaves will heat you up.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking like I mean, look, they do, but the amount that we encounter on a daily basis, they're not really going to do it.
It's not.
And yes, if you stick your head in a microwave, it's not going to do anything nuclear to you. It's just going to heat you up.
Might boil your brain though.
Yeah, please don't. Like the safety stuff on microwaves are there for a reason.
Yeah.
But and here's the other thing too with lasers where it gets more tricky. Lasers get less efficient as an inherent property the shorter the wavelength. So going from red colors down to blue, it gets less efficient. So it actually, even though the individual photons have more energy, it's actually harder to get as many photons. So it's actually quite a difficult question to give an answer. But if you're talking about lasers that you want to see, the best one is green. Because the shorter wavelengths scatter more, so you actually get more of the light coming out sideways, which is how you see a laser beam. That's why in the movies they put chalk dust in when they're going through a security system to see the lasers, because the laser's not being directed at you. So you actually need something to send bits of the photon off. That's what you're doing, or some of the photons off. And green does that. Shorter wavelengths do that more. Green is also a bit more efficient than a blue laser, so you'll actually have more of them. Plus, our eyes are most sensitive to green light. So, yeah, I hope that...
oddly enough, we don't see our own star as being green.
Yes, though the highest photon count, if you do a Planck distribution in terms of wavelength, and I do need to add that fancy bit in there just to be technically correct, is in the green. But the most amount of energy from our sun is in the infrared, which is not a surprise because you go out and it's warm. Well, I mean, maybe not if you're in America at the moment. From
the visible spectrum point of view, our sun is technically a green sun, not a yellow sun. It's just that it is so bright that overwhelms your retina, so you see it as it's white light. But if you check out the individual types of photons coming off our star, it is predominantly green. So we have a green sun.
Yes, and I actually did do a video on that, but I might actually do a video about whether
we have talked about this before, actually, in a different stream.
Look, I'm gonna leave the end bit of that because I said I do actually want to do a recorded video at some point.
I so think you should, because it is such an interesting topic. Because people go, "Oh, where are the green stars?" Well, they're there. It's just that our eyes get so flooded by it's over your head, but our eyes get so flooded by the intensity of the light that we don't see it as green. Our brain goes, "Oh, just bright splotch." Basically.
Yeah, go watch the green sun video on my channel if you want more on that one. I can't give all the answers here because otherwise, if I fail to shill my own channel, I'm failing at YouTube, I think. Maybe I'll do that anyway. All right, now I'm trying to keep track. Hopefully that clears up.
I don't think we've had another one yet.
Hopefully the stream's not freezing.
I thought they would. That's amazing.
Sorry?
No one's asked the question. I thought they would.
Well, not yet. We'll see. I've already been asked that question today, and I'll tell everyone at the end.
We can tell now, yeah.
Yes.
Is there anything in the sciencey news or anything that people have brought up recently that anybody would like to have an answer to, if we can possibly give it? I mean, it may be something that either Matt or I don't know the answer to. That's quite probable.
I'll still answer it. My answer might just
try
be
and
I
answer
don't know.
Yes.
So we shall see.
And we might not know the complete answer, in which case it might be a case of we're going to give you our best summation of it without you might having to tell you to go look it up, because we're going to waffle through it a little bit.
Yes. I'm also tempted, talking about videos and just filling in time for the next question. I am tempted to re-release my last recorded video after making a couple of edits, because I think I can actually make a few changes that make it a lot better. And I really liked that video. It was actually fun to make, but it was a lot of effort. But YouTube seemed to actually like it.
My
but yeah, I
favorite
gotta,
thing that you've done would be the life in the solar system.
yes, you
That
helped me
was
a lot for
epic.
that
I
one.
know I helped you,
Oh
but
yeah,
so did other
please go
people.
watch that one, people. That was like 2-3 months worth of work to get like 100 views
And
on two
it is an
parts.
epic video. It really covers the whole lot. And yeah, I mean, I helped Matt with some animations, but I mean, Tessa helped you out with some of the science as well.
Oh
And
yes,
it's
she
just
did.
an amazing.
Oh yeah, we got a few more people.
Hi, Neil.
Yeah, we got
I'm
Helms and
Stephanie.
Neil, Aunt Jo. Oh, hey, I don't know if I've said. I don't think I've said hi to Aunt. So hello.
And Jeff.
Oh, okay. This is a good example of one where I'm going to say I don't know, but it actually really depends on the animal. There have been some
And what they've
interesting
eaten.
uses of it, though. I know in the medieval period they used to actually use it to clear it as a delousing method. So they used to
Ooh.
dump all of the waste out of the castles, and then they would actually hang their laundry above the piles and above the cesspits, because some of the fumes in particular that came off it would get rid of lice and fleas and other things. Yeah. Also on that, and little historical note is that everyone talks about how the Romans were quite clean because they had running water. I mean, yes, for the time. However, if you were a wealthy individual and had your own private toilet, it was most likely located in the kitchen, because they
Oh,
would dump food products down it.
because it was
So
a
they
waste
ended up
disposal
giving
unit as
themselves a
well.
lot. Yeah, they ended up getting sick a lot more than they needed to, because yeah, they basically had the open sewer system running through the kitchen. Because remember, they
It's one of
weren't
those
flush
things.
toilets; they were just
If you've
constant
got a
running.
bathroom that's got your toilet in it, you really shouldn't keep your toothbrushes out, because you're
Yes,
basically brushing
yeah.
your teeth with fecal matter.
Yeah, put the close the cupboard and always put the seat down, like the lid down when you hit that flush button, because otherwise you end up with a plume of bacteria. It's like a 4-meter radius at least for particles. So make sure that if your toothbrush has to be in that you either enclose it or you make sure the lid's down, or preferably both. So yeah, I can't give an answer because it's also very, very complicated. It's a bit like asking what's the chemical makeup
Yeah,
of
I mean,
human.
it depends on the animal, depends on what they eat.
Mm,
It depends on your
this,
gut biome as well, because your
yeah,
gut, because I mean, everybody's gut biome is slightly different, and that's what helps you digest food. So that changes the chemical makeup of your shit. So it depends. So like even from day to day, a human being shit can have. Oh, I'm sick of saying that word now. It can have a different chemical makeup because of the way your gut biome is working and what you've eaten.
yeah. Maybe that was a question for my dad. He's a gastroenterologist, so uh, yes. But yeah, the things that you learn in a day. There are people who've done studies on this stuff, and it's just like, I wonder what the grant would have looked like. I don't exactly want to have been the person who had to
It's
write the
like the
grant.
thing in
But
bathrooms with hand air dryers for hands. Air
I
dryers
prefer
for
paper
hands.
towels.
Air dryers for hands are actually um less good at keeping the environment clean than using a paper towel, because the air dryers actually spread everything everywhere in the same way that a toilet does. So
And
you're
even if you had,
effectively being less.
say, like a UV filter on them or UV light,
Yeah.
things are going to get sprayed too fast through it. You're not going to kill everything. So yeah, um, oh, here's one that I might actually have to do a quick Google of another question. Would you care to comment on Hugh Everett's take on QM quantum mechanics? I don't actually really, not really familiar with him. I don't
Do you
know
want
if
to
I
hop in,
should be familiar.
Stephanie, and tell us about it?
Yeah. Look, if
Yeah.
there's any aspect of it that you want me to tackle, feel free to let me know. As the quantum mechanic's not quite my area, but if he's
Neither.
on the border of more like a woo peddler, I can probably explain why he's wrong. Most of them it doesn't take too much. But yeah, I'm gonna do a quick Google in the meantime. I don't know. Do you know anything about him,
No, I
Jen?
don't. I don't know.
Oh well. See, I told you I was gonna get stumped today because I have my areas of expertise.
Well said, Neil. Green lasers is how you make green eggs and ham. Oh, it's a many worlds theory. Okay.
Oh, okay. Is this the one where it's actually like you have different states and there is a world for each state that occurs? Is that the one that is that the one that we yeah, I'm just looking it up now. Hugh Everett the third. It's interesting. Says relative state formation in contrast to the then dominant Copenhagen interpretation, the multi-worlds interpretation posits that a wave function never collapses and that all possibilities of a quantum superposition are objectively real. Okay, let me explain this in as simple terms as I can try and get it. So in quantum mechanics, you have these things called states, and these are basically the outcomes or the positions and the things that can occur. When you start to learn quantum mechanics, particularly at a university level, you tend to start off with systems with two states. And a good one to think about it, you can think of electrons being up and down, or you can just have like I've seen people like label them all sorts of weird things, but they're just descriptions of what can occur. It gets more complicated than that, but let's just for the moment think about the simplest case of up and down.
Yeah.
Now in that system you have two states, and I remember starting off doing a lot of assignments that centered around having about 50-50 probabilities for them. Now, until you actually measure that state or measure which state a particle or a system is in, you don't actually know which one it is. It's a 50. It's a probability as to which one you'll get. It's like a probability distribution. It's the way that you could say that particles were in more than one place at the same time, because the actual distribution of where they could be based on probability actually spans technically infinitely, but what they normally do is they cut it off at about 80%. So where is the 80% range? Because it gets less and less, and it gets so minuscule that it's meaningless after a certain amount of time. So it's basically, okay, where likely we find these things? Now, with quantum mechanics, when you actually make an observation, you collapse the wave function, you take a measurement, you find out what state it is in. However, taking that measurement resets the state.
Yeah.
So it resets the system.
Because of the way
so then if you go and measure it again, so let's say you have up and down, we have a particle, it goes through, we measure it as up, we measure it again, it goes back to being 50% chances whether it's up or down. So we might measure it as up a second time, or we might measure it as down the second time.
That's because our act of measuring it can change it, because to measure it, we have to interact with it. And as soon as you interact with a particle, you've changed something about it.
Yeah. This is, if you want more on it, you can go look up the double slit experiment, because that's the sort of thing that does it, where you get a waveform when you're not looking. When you are looking, you just get them passing through.
So what what at the Everett proposition that Stephanie's talking about is that even though in our particular universe we may see that as the wave function is collapsing, within the entire multiverse, all possibilities of that wave function exist somewhere in the multiverse.
Yeah. So every time it's realized it's actually a different world that's realized. Yeah. So it's basically everything actually happens. So when I measure this, and I know this is a simple two-state system, but now imagine when you do something the size of the universe, how many different states there are across the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean,
but yeah, I measure the state of up in my previous example the first time, but at the same time, there's another world sort of multiverse where someone measured down, or where another version of me measured down. Look, it's an interesting hypothesis, but as from my very limited understanding of it, the results would be indistinguishable from our current understanding of just getting one, and
And
that
this
was
is
what
one
we
of the problems we
observed.
have
And
with
it doesn't
its
really solve
observation.
anything. Yeah, look,
The
it's an
the
interesting thought
Copenhagen
experiment.
interpretation of quantum mechanics works in our universe, and it works very well.
Yeah,
Regardless of whether it is exactly the right interpretation, which we don't know at the moment. It's one of those things that we honestly have to say we don't know, but it does work. If it didn't work, we wouldn't have the computers that we're using. And we wouldn't have quantum clocks. We wouldn't have lots of other things. We wouldn't the chilling things with lasers wouldn't happen. The fact is it actually works. There are other interpretations, for example, Everett's interpretation, which get you to the same results. Pilot waves get you to the same results, and it's separate from the Copenhagen thing. But the thing that we have the expression that we the sorry expression the technique that we have the most tools to work with to get our answers is the Copenhagen interpretation, because we've had many years working with it. So we have Feynman diagrams, we have all these other tools that let us calculate things in quantum mechanics, which we don't necessarily have for the other ones, even though you could use the same tools. But what does it matter which interpretation it is then, as long as the tools are working, is what it comes down to. Until maybe in the future we have some way of measuring particles without interfering with them, which I don't know if that could ever be a thing. We cannot know which interpretation of quantum mechanics is accurate. And that doesn't matter how big a super collider we build or anything like that. We would have to have an entirely different measuring system to what we have now to be able to figure out which version of quantum mechanics is correct.
Yeah, and yeah, as I said, if you can't tell the difference between them, and we already have one that works really well, because this is the thing: science is not some like ultimate truth. Science is a tool with which we describe the universe or come up with descriptions of the universe. And so, if you have a description that works perfectly well, the only way you're going to replace that is to either improve it or to find another description that works better. Science is about predicting the future, and if you can't make better predictions, there's probably no point using it. It's, as I said, it's an interesting thought experiment, but it's not going to get us any further than our current one.
As Stephanie said, sorry, Matt, it solves the problem of collapsing the wave function artificially. That's only because in a many worlds scenario, you don't technically need to collapse the wave function, because all the function results are equally valid. They just happen in different universes. But it's still only a possible interpretation. We can't know if it's the right interpretation or the wrong interpretation without proving many worlds, and then proving that those many worlds are actually caused by these different function results of the wave function. And that's the thing. And we may never know those. Those are things we may never know the answers to. So it's one of those things. I don't think it really matters at the moment. It may do in our future, but right now we have the tools to solve many of the things in quantum mechanics now. It only becomes a problem if with the fringe line stuff where we can't solve the problems. I don't think it's actually a problem of collapsing the wave function artificially. Whether or not the wave function collapses, or there's pilot waves and you don't really have a wave function that collapses, or you're there's a multiverse where every wave function is equally valid, doesn't matter, because the universe we live in behaves like the wave function collapses. It's how we interpret it because of the tools we have to observe the universe.
I
don't think it's a problem.
Anyway, moving on to a very, very different question. I have a science question, and I guess it's kind of close to science, or at least I'm going to try and answer it in a science way. I need my special Xmas underpants, but the washing machine is taking too long. Should I join a cult and sell my hat to stupid people who think Elon Musk is clever? I don't even know where to start answering this one, but I shall try. Look, some of his companies have done a lot of work. Like Tesla has done a fair bit for cars, although I've heard mixed results as to how good they are. I'm avoiding getting political here because I know how easy it is talking about Elon Musk to get there. I will avoid talking about a certain platform which most of you are coming here probably from, at least at some point along the journey. And like SpaceX has done a lot of work for space exploration.
Yeah.
I am very curious to see whether that same work would have been done if the money from SpaceX had just been spent in NASA. However, SpaceX's biggest customer is NASA.
Yeah.
So to some extent, they are doing NASA's work. So I think the company itself probably does a fair bit of good stuff. But remember, Elon's not doing the science. He's just like in charge of the company.
He's marketing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even his people, even his companies that technically aren't doing the science, because most of the science, most of the things that his companies do is it's grab obscure ideas that haven't been developed further and then develop them. They are developing companies that develop technology that other people invented.
Yeah, and there's a lot of times that has very clearly failed. The Hyperloop is a good one.
Hyperloop is a perfect example. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go watch Thunderfoot's one. And again, I'm trying not to get too political with. Yeah, they've had a few failures, and I think that's because remember Elon Musk is not a scientist. He's not. I don't even think he pretends to be, although he does sometimes pretend to be a bit of a a pioneer. Though I don't think that him or like Bezos or any of the ones who have their big races to space in rocket ships that are arguably compensation for something else, or at least the Blue Origins one looked like it. Look, they bring in a lot of attention for space exploration, and they do bring more attention to science. So in that sense, maybe sell your hat, but at the same time, it's hard to tell what would happen if that money had just, let's say, instead of building these, had just been put into, I guess, a bit more fundamental research. Sorry, I'm trying to answer that one. Probably way more complicated than Stool was actually expecting. But yeah, look, it's an interesting one because it's a balance of putting up with a few really rich billionaires having a race, but at least it's one way to get money for exploration versus other ways of doing it. And I guess I'll leave it to people's interpretation as to which one they think is better. Look, Jeff's question I do quite like, which is the next one after that. But I'm not going to display it because I do have a policy that I don't get political or theological on this channel. So although it is a bit of a joke. But then again, look,
question.
If Australians evolved from British people, then why are they still British people? It's yeah. I look, like as I said, it's a funny question. It's somewhat scientific. Well, I mean, maybe that explains why maybe if we evolved from British people, that's why every time the British invent something, we steal it and make it better because we're better at doing it. I mean, cricket, rugby, etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably just started 4 bar fights with that comment, but
we just evolved to be better at these things than the Ponds are.
Yeah.
If you want to argue against that, Jeff, you better come on.
I have another question from Aunt Jo. What is your favorite question? Any that involve lasers, particularly if there's also sharks. But absolute favorite, anywhere my answer can be 42. What about you, Jen?
Oh, my favorite question. Look, anything that especially the questions that end up being space or astronomy related, because it's just fascinating when you go into that.
What are you talking about, Jen? We've never got distracted and spent ages talking on tangents about space and space exploration and other worlds before. And
we haven't done hours of the James Webb Space Telescope yet. We did a bit of it, but we've done one of our movie streams with Mero, but we haven't done a whole heap of it.
We did do one. I think we did a bit on James Webb. I think we have covered
we did.
A bit.
We covered it a bit in one of our videos where we were talking about a movie and we got sidetracked with Mero and we ended up talking about James Webb.
I thought we did a stream on it. I know I did a stream on
we did
Granny's channel, but I thought we did one on... Yeah, I think we did one.
You're right. We did one before it was launched because we were talking about what its aims were and stuff. So, yeah, you're right. We did.
No. Yes.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, no, I'm going to wait a little bit longer before I do another one on James Webb because I want more science publications to come out, and there's a few people around me who are better suited than me to actually interpret those findings because I know a bunch of actual astronomers whose PhDs are in astronomy because, well, I'm part of an astrophotonics group, even though I don't actually do
as
astro.
we get the more planet visualizations with that, I'd love to talk with Tess again about it.
Oh yes, that'd be interesting. Look, yeah, that is probably another thing for another stream, but I do want to actually, at least in one of those future streams, cover a little bit up on its potentials for picking up life or the traces of life on other planets.
If anyone's wondering who Tess is, she's an exobiologist. In other words, she studies the possibilities of life on other worlds. It's what she does.
Yeah, I got to help Jen interview her on Jen's channel, but I haven't had her on mine. I don't, and I want to change that at some point. But yeah, I'm actually planning to have more regular streams next year, so maybe I will try and set that one up because that is a really fascinating topic. Anyway, we've had a few more people join us as well. So I see that Dick is hanging out in the chat. Maya, you're there. And I know the two of you are extremely tired because it's quite late for you guys. Paul, welcome as well. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling back through the chat. I am trying to catch up where we are. So seeing exactly where we are. Oh, there's a few bigger ones. Let's have a look. I don't see question marks. It's not a question, but you have to come join us on the Shills for a Space Denier debunk night. Yeah, I'd happily do that. Particularly if they want to do anything about astronomy and how we know what stellar bodies are made of, because guess what I'm an expert in? Yeah, spectroscopy. I'm a physical chemist who deals in spectroscopy. So if you want to ask me about how we know what things are made of, that's when I'm happy. If anyone is wondering what I actually do for a living, just to explain the name for those who haven't seen me before, I'm currently doing a PhD in physics, and I make methane sing with a laser for environmental detection. If you're wondering why there's no video, yeah, I love it too, but I have spent way too much time thinking about that. The reason I haven't put a video up on what I do for the PhD is I'm actually waiting till I finish. If I finish, hopefully I'll finish it off. So that way I can actually do it on what I found rather than just I'm trying to do this. I think it'd be much nicer to have one towards the end of the project, wherever that one is, wherever that may be. So
Andrea, don't be so hard on yourself. You have a stellar body anyway.
Sorry, I haven't quite caught up with the bottom. So, which Leavener is the most clever? Am I missing something, Jen? I don't.
Yeah, I don't know what she's getting at there.
Yeah. Sorry, I might need a bit more explanation.
More context. Yeah. It's obviously a joke, but we need context.
Oh, look, I said at the beginning of this, and I said it on the opening stream for this marathon, and I also put it in a retweet. So not a retweet, a tweet. That I will answer any question as long as it's scientific. So yeah, I don't care if it's a joke. I've made my promise. I will try and keep to it.
And Geof,
I think you're late to the party, Stool. I think we've got space pants.
Yeah, they were in Wallace and Grumman.
Also, Dawson, I'll see you. I'm sure I'll see you around at some point. Have a good one. If you haven't left already, if you have, well, hopefully you just went up. Oops, wrong one. PhDs are cool, but what color is your fridge? Red, because I'm shining a red laser at it. See, that goes back to the laser cooling. I'm terrible for
Oh,
science jokes.
okay.
Yes, there is a video on my channel.
Jenny's done it. Jenny's done it.
Oh,
Not
have we got it?
exactly, but she's got close.
Oh, so damn close. Your opinion on how soon they will have a sustained fusion reaction? Okay. So, and when will it be scaled up is the addition to that. Now, here's the thing. I'm not a plasma physicist, but some of my colleagues are. Although, because of unfortunate ways of funding in Australia, we're about to lose the last few people who actually do plasma physics at where I do my PhD. It's actually quite sad. In the time I've been at uni, it's 10th year next year, I've seen an entire section of physics die, basically. But there's still enough of them around to talk about, because we actually have a fusion reactor. And I'm on a floor lower than it, so it's above me, actually. I'm in the basement, they're on the ground floor. But it's not a big one. But I do talk to them about this sort of stuff often, and every time I ask them, and this is their areas of research, it's like it could be 10 days, it could be 10 years.
Yeah.
Closer to the 10, 20, 30 year mark. It's probably still in the orders of decades away. Mainly because to make it efficient, you have to scale them up, and that's not easy. If you want to get an idea of just how insane the engineering is to make some of these fusion reactors run, go look up the specs for ITER. That's the international one in France that it's basically half of Europe is collaborating on. It's way over budget, but the specs of its size are insane. It's one of the biggest science experiments outside of CERN.
This is one of the reasons I think if we end up with sustained fusion, it probably won't be with tokamaks or with laser initiated fusion. I think
we're going to be laser one.
I know we did, but I think we're going to be looking at some of the other newer techniques that are coming out, which are variants of those, but don't require the same level of upscaling to get net energy back out of it. That's the theory on them. The hypothesis on them. I shouldn't say theory because I'm using theory incorrectly there. That's the hypothesis behind them. And I think that they might, if we were going to have fusion in shorter than maybe 20 to 30 years, one of those systems will be the systems that does it. It'll be one of the newer type systems that are coming into play.
Yeah, they basically have to finish working on things like ITER and some of the new systems that are still being built, which could still take decades to get the results from them, or at least
my biggest problem with the money,
and then they need to rebuild them on a commercial scale. So we've got at least another full generation of science experiments to go before we'll see anything that would feed power into the grid, if at all. Now, look, the colleagues I have and the friends I have who are in it have voiced somewhat skeptical opinions of the smaller ones, just because of the nature of fusion. It actually is a hard thing to do on a smaller scale. I know Lockheed and Martin once claimed they were going to try and develop basically
2015 they told us we'll have something in 5 years. Well, you missed that boat.
Yeah, but and then it actually opens up a very interesting problem in science, in that one of the things that happens is that the general population is not used to how slow and boring science actually is. Now, whilst the findings of science can be interesting, the actual progress of science is expensive and it is slow. It is 100% worth it, and I will as much as I made jokes earlier about dying on certain hills, this is one I actually will happily die on. It is always worth it. Knowing more about how the universe works.
Fusion, though, that we don't tend to talk about with it, and that is the scales of economics for fusion. And one of the problems we're going to run up to fusions is some of the newer technologies we have coming for renewables, especially some of the next generation solar systems, the better wind turbines that are coming in and things like that, are going to make it that, is it going to be worthwhile to keep trying to build very, very expensive fusion tests things when we can actually produce the energy just as efficiently, but for less cost, by ramping up renewables.
Yeah,
There is a
look,
sense that this may be the way it is. And the other side of that is we want fusion. We've got a huge, great big thunking star out there that's pumping out fusion energy every single day. And we could probably spend some of the money we were spending on fusion building a small Dyson swarm that would give us every bit of as much energy as we could get out of doing.
Yeah. One of the advantages of still, even after that point, developing a fusion reactor wouldn't be energy, but it would be helium. That is one thing we're running low on, and it runs a lot of essential medical and scientific equipment, particularly MRI scanners. Is the one that
is
comes
where
to the
the
top of my
small
head.
fusion
Cryogenics,
reactors, which might not be energy positive, but can still build fusion at a decent rate, might become the thing that we end up using to make the helium for ourselves, because we could do that with the smaller fusion reactors if we have an abundance of energy from other sources, which we could have with a small Dyson swarm. It's Lagrange 1 between us and the sun, isn't it? I always get them confused.
Think so.
It's either Lagrange 1 or 2.
I'd have to have another look at the diagram, but
I think it's one, but I can't remember. It's either 1 or 2, but I can't remember. If you put a small Dyson swarm, which by small, it's going to be bloody big, but if you put a small Dyson swarm at Lagrange 1, so it's between the Earth and the sun, you get 2 benefits. One, it'll block off some of the energy from the sun, which is very handy considering how much we've ruined our atmosphere. And 2, we'd have an energy source, that a small swarm that's always going to be in a stable orbit near where the Earth is, so we could get the energy back to us. And we could get the energy back to us because technically we could beam it to orbiting satellites that were always placed in a position between us and the Lagrange point. So,
I mean, look, those are fascinating, but personally, I think the amount of energy that hits us from the sun that actually reaches the planet's surface is more than enough to keep
at the moment,
going. And I think most of the things that, like when we talk about all of the problems, particularly going back to the earlier question about certain people, or at least certain individuals that think they want to get us to other planets, because in case anything happens to this one, no. If we have the capability of moving people to another planet or building things on a massive enough scale to basically shield or do the Earth, we can fix whatever problem we're facing. And so in that sense, I have no problem with doing the science to get us to other planets, but it's because of the science and the understanding we develop along the way.
Yeah.
It's the same argument for the Apollo missions. Because it wasn't getting to the moon that advanced science, but the processes of developing methods that could get us there. And NASA
the
has developed a
benefits
lot of amazing things.
Developing fusion is propulsion. One of the huge advantages of developing fusion is going to be propulsion in the future, because fusion-based rockets could be our ticket to getting to nearby star systems within human lifespan.
We can already do it. Well, okay, this is kind of cheating, but we can already build a fusion-powered rocket. We build a rocket the size of the Empire State Building with a giant shock absorber on the back of it, and yes, this actually was part of a program. Yeah, and then we drop H bombs out the back, which are fusion bombs. They basically use a mini
fusion
regular nuke to start a fusion reaction to detonate. You've used some of them as the propulsion, and this is actually a project that was seriously considered. Go watch my video on Project Orion if you want. They tested it with conventional explosives.
Yeah,
and it actually showed a lot of promise. That's things that
they only stopped developing it because of the nuclear test ban treaties. So you weren't allowed to put nuclear stuff in space. So how do you build this rocket?
Although some of the reports from that project did talk about the eye burn of onlookers if they had done it. So it was going to be an interesting one.
The plan wasn't to launch a rocket within the atmosphere with that. You'd use
they did have plans to do that as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm stupid about that. But if you did it now, you wouldn't launch inside the atmosphere with a nuclear rocket.
You would use conventional explosives in the atmosphere and then switch to nukes when you basically get into space, because the atmosphere's too thin by then to support conventional explosives.
You'd also have to launch even further away from civilization than you currently do with chemical rockets, because a conventionally explosive launched rocket would be way noisier
Yep. I mean,
And it's pulse
rockets are already
detonation, so it's not just a constant loud noise. It's big boom, bit of a yep.
yeah. You probably don't want to be anywhere near it. But I mean, rockets are already giant bombs because the fuel itself has to be efficient. So the way you make it efficient is to basically make it an explosive, so that when it burns,
Yeah.
which is also why when things go wrong, they tend to go horribly wrong.
Technically, yeah, all our rockets at the moment are great big bombs.
Yeah,
that's how we
they're
get
just
into space.
controlled pipe bombs.
Yeah,
They're controlled pipe bombs. Now they're very, very fancy pipe bombs, but that's essentially what they are. Now, yes, also because we were talking about NASA, NASA budget. That's actually seems to be a global thing in a lot of places. What have you seen?
Love you, Jess.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yes, their vacuums do still. Sorry. Now, okay. I did say I'd address science ones, and next time you have to do this one. Yes, they did. But there is an argument, and I've heard some physicists say that the main one, Werner von Braun, who the Americans pilfered during Operation Paperclip at the end of World War II, who was an ex-Nazi, as much as he pretended he had nothing to do with the Nazi party, despite the fact they could prove he was part of the Nazi party, and then he pretended that he didn't actually, he wasn't really, he didn't go to the meetings, and then people show photos of him at the rallies and the meetings. Then he says, no, I only went along with them just because I had to. I never actually did any of the horrid things, and then we learnt that more people died building his rockets than were actually killed by them, particularly the V2. He had nothing to do with the V1. That was Luftwaffe, not the rocketry division. But the V2 was the world's first ICBM. And it was the first man-made controlled rocket to reach space. Yes, we'd actually taken photos of the Earth from space before then, but it was the first rocket to get into space. But his contributions to the American space program, they're definitely there, but would it have been the same if someone else had been in charge? Would they have gotten further? That's still
there
open
were a
for
lot
debate.
of Americans who were up there with him with the technology.
Particularly because at the end of the war they got the technology anyway, so they could have just handed it to their own scientists. So
yeah, and there were already Americans and British people working on rocketry at the same time as the Germans were developing it.
Yeah,
it's not like these things were new when they were working on it. There
it
were
was
people
just the Germans were a bit
already
more advanced in certain areas.
Yeah.
And also, this is not to forget that the Soviets were more advanced in the entire space race, beating the Americans at every single step, except the last one to land on the moon. They were the first to do everything else. The first to put anything on the moon, the first to be in orbit, the first to do manned walks. Pretty much every first except for the end of Apollo. That was when the Americans
only because they had problems with their really large rocket boosters. Because they went with the multiple smaller rockets, and they had to fire them exactly timed to launch. They actually had enormous problems making that work initially, and that was what delayed them getting to the moon, which enabled NASA to get there first. And once they got there, the Russians didn't see any point.
Yeah, they did actually have plans on paper to then be like, okay, we'll get to Mars first. But then, the Soviet Union kind of had a couple of issues and, just casually collapsed.
Yeah.
So they never got there. The Soviet Union by the 80s, when they planned to actually do it, was just a tiny bit broke.
Yeah. Jenny asked a question about ion engines.
I'm not overly familiar with ion engines, but from what I've heard, they are a decent method for propulsion, but I think it'd be small scale.
Not in an atmosphere.
Because you don't actually... I think they're smaller scale.
There was some recent developments in the last couple of years in your neck of the woods, Matt, where they've been working on ablative ion engines. So the fuel for it is actually a solid, and as the ion engine operates, it actually ablates the next layer off. And what they can do is it's still got thrust control, which is one of the really good things about ion engines. but it delivers about 10 times the thrust that a standard ion engine does.
Yeah, but it's
So
still quite small.
That's really small. I mean, when
These
you're
are
talking
not
about
launching
an ion
engines.
engine, is
These are
like a piece
control.
of
These are
paper
steerage
resting on your hand.
engines.
Yeah.
This is more if we just want to rotate the thing once it's already in
Well,
orbit.
no, once you're in space, because of course ion engines can run for years, you can accelerate for a long period of time, which you can't with a chemical rocket because you just can't contain that
Yeah,
much
that's
fuel.
fair.
This is why ion engines work for long missions. You know, we've had lots of long
Yeah.
missions that have got out there that use ion engines, and they're great, but they take a long time to accelerate, which is not going to be good for manned missions at the moment. Vizimir is an ion engine, but it's an ion engine hybrid, and it's a great invention. You could get to Mars in 3 months using it. However, our biggest problem is power generation, which comes back to the why it's actually still a good idea to spend money on fusion. Because if we could build smaller fusion things, you could use a fusion power plant to power a Vizimir engine, which would be amazing because Vizimir engines are pretty impressive. What the Vizimir engine does is it takes a heavier gas and ionizes it using microwaves. So it heats up the gas, gets it to a level of being the ions, and then it ejects that gas out the back in the same sort of propulsory systems that we use for standard ion engines. But because it's a plasma that we've actually built using microwaves, you can use heavy, like I said, you can use a heavier gas, but you can also pump more of it through. So you've got a throttling system in that can use up more fuel, but it gets the exhaust rates that you get out of an ion engine. So you don't have to use quite as much fuel as a standard rocket to get a similar thrust ratio. So it's actually got one of the largest specific impulses of any engine, the Vizimir, until you get up to actual nuclear rockets or antimatter rockets or something like that. You have to use one of those things to get a better specific impulse out of it. Specific impulse is the amount of thrust you get per propulsion to the amount of time that you're firing the engine. So the higher your specific impulse, the more efficient the engine is.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the benefits of it is those long range ones. It is very hard to take enough fuel with you for a long range mission. Yeah, and that's always going to be the thing, is because remember, if you're going to another planet, even if you accelerate from Earth or have some massive system to launch you to the next, star system or whichever star system we're going to, you got to slow down at the other end.
Yeah,
you actually have to be able to land people, and if you've used all of your fuel just to take off, you don't have much to. Yeah, so having something
if
that
you
is
had a
fuel
ship that could
efficient,
thrust all the way between here and Alpha Centauri, what you'd effectively doing would be you'd be in the flight there. You'd be having your thrust going, if you could actually run the thrust for that length of time. You'd actually be thrusting all the way there, and halfway there, you'd flip the direction of the ship, and you'd thrust in the other direction, and that would slow you down to get to the star system. So the first part would be spent accelerating, the second half would be spent decelerating, because otherwise you're going to have problems when you get to the other end. This is one of the problems they're going to have with solar sails. Whilst we could use solar sails to get small probes to Alpha Centauri, within 10 years, and there is a possibility that we will see something like that launched within the next 15 years. Our problem is at the other end. How do you slow that probe down? Because we can't push on it from a laser from here. I mean, you're out of range anyway, but then, so we have to work out ways of slowing down. There's a couple of things that we can do, as far as like looking at using the star at the other end to capture it as it swings in and change its. But you're talking about something that we're moving at a really good whack at the speed of light. If you get up to 10% of the speed of light, slowing something down just by gravity capture at the other end is going to be really hard to do. And we are a very long way away. So we can't know if we've got our calculations exactly right over those sort of distances. Even James Webb, because he's not going to give us the resolution we need to be able to see where things are going to be in that 10 years, right down smack bang on the money, enough that we could slow stuff down. So we do need other ways of being able to slow these ships down as they approach the other end. Once you can get to the other end, if you can get equipment there and stuff like that, and you can build some sort of laser system to slow down the solar sail at the other end, no problems, because you just fired the laser system at the other end to slow down the solar sail. But Yeah.
Yes, I actually listened to a talk by one of my professors on where they were trying to solve one problem of solar sails, and it was very interesting. And I was tempted to kind of do a bit of a video on some of the aspects because they talked about a solar sail, just to give you how much energy is involved. And this is also, so I'm actually going to bring up this question from Jenny as well, because I will answer this one at the same time. When we're talking about going to, say, like Alpha Centauri, or another star system, we would have to travel much faster than our current rockets do. We've got to go some appreciable percentage of the speed of light. So to give you an idea, this other professor was looking at the problem of sending a spaceship that weighed 1 gram, basically the size of a sultana, because that was the sort of thing that would actually get accelerated to about 20% the speed of light, at which point it would take you about 20 years to get to the closest star to us, or apart from the sun, closest non-sun star, just to make that clear. And if you launch if it's heavier, then we have other problems too, because the laser will diverge, you'll get less efficient the further away we get. To give you an idea of just how much energy that 1 gram Sultana spacecraft would have, 1 gram traveling at the speed of light is about the momentum equivalent of an aircraft carrier traveling 500 kilometers an hour, or about 250 knots, which is about 3 times the speed of a race car. So we're talking about something that is would be the equivalent of strapping rockets to an aircraft carrier, but it's so small. So when we talk about deceleration, it's a very different problem to when you send something to when we send something to Mars, because in that case you can just generally use the slingshot effect, where you basically just use the gravity of Mars to capture it, and then you can maybe drop something off and decelerate it using Mars's atmosphere. It's why a lot of our satellites will come down after a while, or we actually have to send things to boost them up. The International Space Station needs regular trips to it, not just to keep the people inside.
It's one of the places where they've been trying out ion engines is on the ISS, because you can use ion engines to lift yourself up.
You actually need other rockets to go to it and then push it up a bit higher. So
but further to Jenny's question, it's the same thing I was talking about with if we get a decent percentage of the speed of light as a travel thing, you have to have some way of slowing down. So even a 3-month Vizimir rocket to Mars would fire its engines for probably the first month, coast for a month, and then it would turn around and slow down for the last month. And it gets there within 3, because you don't have to be accelerating all the time. You just slow down the thing. Remember, there's no just shoving on the brakes in space. You have to apply as much thrust as you did to get up to speed to slow back down. And they only have to slow down enough to be slow enough to be capturable by Mars's gravity.
Yeah.
Once you get to that point, you're fine.
Yeah.
In fact, you don't want to slow down all the way, because you want to get into an insertion point for orbit. You don't.
Yeah, you actually want to be in orbit.
Slow down
you need to be going certain speed. I do want to add one more thing to is that you don't need to slow all the way down, but but we're going less than 1% of the speed of light.
Way less.
When we're traveling to Mars. Yeah. Way less. But we're talking about something that's going about 20. So we're talking multiple orders of magnitude faster, and momentum's not your friend. Although on that, I'm curious as to actually, I've never started a poll. Am I allowed to do polls?
I don't know.
I can.
Oh, cool.
I'm going to do this. This is
so Cosmic Kyle and Jenny were talking about as well. There was something about their appreciable. Carl Sagan saying that an ion engine has the potential of traveling just below the speed of light. Is that true? Well, technically, because the ions are being ejected at close to the speed of light out the back of an ion engine. Close to. Not quite there, but close to. And because there's no friction in space, effectively, if you can run the engine for long enough, you could technically get up to that sort of speed. However, the amount of energy required and the time taken to do it is very much dependent on the amount of mass of the object you're accelerating and how much you've got. So At the moment, could we do that? No. We wouldn't. We'd
But
run out of fuel before you got to anywhere
yeah,
near that sort of speed, because you still need fuel for ion engines.
but at our current understanding, there's nothing that says that it
You
shouldn't
can't do
be
it.
possible, at least in theory. But
And
I
if you
mean,
can
in the
get really
same,
close to the speed of light, a human being on that spaceship can travel the entire universe in their own lifetime. Just not in all their people they've left behind's lifetime because of time dilation.
yes, relativity is weird. The faster you go, the slower you go compared to the rest of the universe. But this is
Yeah.
why it gets trippy, because relativity is, whilst it's really cool, it's hard to understand. Basically, if you did start getting close to the speed of light, you would see the rest of the universe go past you in fast forward. The same thing would happen if you actually went near something with a lot of gravity. Gravity slows time down. So someone on the top of a mountain is actually going slightly faster, like their actual frame of reference, the time is ticking faster compared to, because it's all relative to, someone who's close to the surface of the Earth, because you're a bit close to the center of mass, so the gravity is ever so slightly more. Now, it ends up not even being a second over someone's whole lifetime, so you're never actually going to notice it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's all these other things that go on too that you got to consider with space travel. But yeah, there are ways to do this. But again, doing something in theory is not the same as doing it in practice, because we can theoretically make warp drives. But as Cosmic Kyle has very rightly pointed out, to do these sorts of things, whether it's a warp drive or just get to relativistic
And Jenny has
speeds,
asked about warp
the
drives later down
amount
as
of
well.
energy you need is just insane. And
Well,
the problem here is
the
storage.
current best theoretical Alcubierre warp drive variant on the Alcubierre warp drive is that you need mass the size of Jupiter to fold space to create
I thought they
create the
came up
warp
with an.
field.
I
Yeah,
thought they came up with one
that was the improved one.
I thought they came up with one that was the US's energy consumption for an entire year.
Oh yeah, you're right. They did. That was the pulsed one.
Yeah,
That relied on a
yeah,
special pulsing format of the thing. But
but
so they've got it
yeah, that
down
was
to
yeah. It
reasonable
was
if you could.
yeah to
But
send a
that
signal, a single spacecraft. That spacecraft would have to have enough energy stored on it to burn off the equivalent of the entire US's energy consumption for a year. Now, yeah, so you're basically putting all of the US's power generation in one spaceship, and this is why it gets so hard, because yeah, this is why the ion engines are cool, because it's not because, and it's why conventional rockets will not ever do it, ever get close to the speed of light, because you get diminishing returns. The bigger you try and make them, the faster you want to go, the more fuel you have to carry. But the fuel weighs stuff, so you need more fuel to accelerate the fuel. And it just gets to a point where the returns are just so diminishingly small that your entire rocket is made of fuel and you're not going to get any faster. It's why about 90%, 90 to 99% of most of the rockets we launch are fuel. And why, as I said, they're flying pipe bombs. They're mainly just an explosive in a tube.
Question from Cosmic Kyle.
Oh, did we? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Let me just go down a little bit. Okay. What do you think about the hypothesis that our three-dimensional universe puts plus one time dimensions is embedded in a fourth spatial dimension in our universe in 3 dimensions, in which our universe in 3 dimensions is infinite while finite 4? This is one where it gets trippy, because sometimes the maths, you can actually make the maths work for all these weird n dimension universes. But my question at the end of the day for most
works in 11, so the
yes,
equations function properly in 11 universes, but you kind of have to then prove that there are 11 dimensions, and we can't do that at the moment. We can't even prove there's more than our current 3 plus 1 dimensions.
yeah, and this
so
is what I
there's a
was
fourth spatial dimension is a little tricky.
yeah, and this is what I was trying to get back to. What we mentioned earlier was the fact that even if the maths works, you still need to be able to test it, and at this stage we just have no way of testing any of these. And
So,
I think that also goes back to, but also runs into Jenny's one as well,
yeah,
as string theory dead. No, the current problem is there's no way to test it.
yeah.
So it's not really a physicist's problem, it's a mathematician's problem. So the maths works for string theory, but we have absolutely no way of putting it to the test. And so you can't really do any science on it until you get to the point of being able to test it.
To be fair,
And
though,
so it's not
another
dead.
variant of string theory, loop quantum gravity, does have testable things that we don't know. Or we can see that there's options that you could possibly test, but we don't know how to test. We don't know how to create the experiments to do the tests. So loop
Yeah,
quantum
I'm
gravity
saying
may
we
be
don't know
the
how to
first
test
of
it
the
in as
extended.
broader sense
Yeah.
as possible
Yeah,
for
so loop
to
quantum
kind of
gravity
cover that.
might be the first of these type of theories that we actually test, just because we've got some basis that we might develop a test from. However, we don't know.
I'll have to have a look at that one because I have heard some things about it, but I'm not too familiar with
Yeah,
the extra dimensions part. But at the same time, not detecting it doesn't mean it's not there. It can be the same
this is one
problem
of our
that flat
problems.
earthers have with
Yeah,
looking out and saying, look, it looks flat. And it could be just your frame of reference is not sufficient to actually see. And this is,
and
so yeah,
the aspect that
unfortunately, I'd have to look at it more.
we could have the whole
Sorry.
concept of in string theory where the extra dimensions are wrapped up tiny, and that's why we can't see them. So if you have wrapped up tiny dimensions, they wouldn't show up in a test like LIGO. So you've got this thing that there are possible solutions to the equations that we've developed that do suggest that wouldn't show up in the current tests that we are able to do. And yeah, I think you're right, Cosmic Carl. The current tests on LIGO aren't looking good for having more extra dimensions, but there are still solutions that are outside of that. To be frank, I have this thing that we have this we have string theory because we have this holy grail that everything in the universe, we think that everything in the universe should be connected at the highest level. All forms of energy should pretty much be the same, and the universe should be all one contiguous thing at some level of equations, and we should spit out something that solves everything for the universe. That's not necessarily true. It's something we want from the idea of being a theoretical mathematician or a theoretical physicist, because it sounds bloody good, but it's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily matter if we have to use different equations to solve different parts of the universe, provided they can work together. So the solution might not be one set of equations that all fits together and describes everything else. It might just be ways of putting those equations together. Very similar to what Stephen Hawking did with black holes, with coming up with Hawking radiation, where he applied quantum physics in a very real way into the way that general relativity works to give us those results. And if you can make these things work together, even though they're disparaging theories, I don't think that matters, provided that we can show that these things work together. So do we have to have a grand unified theory? I don't think we do. I think it's this ideal that we've decided that we needed, but I don't think we
Would
need
be
to have it.
amazing, but
It would,
yeah,
but we don't need
and
it.
To quote Carl Sagan, well, to paraphrase him anyway, the universe does not care about us.
Yeah.
But I mean, and we are on our own. But yeah, the universe has no obligation to us. It doesn't. But we have no obligation to it. Though we are in it, so we do. The more we understand about it, the better we can, the better quality life we can have for ourselves. As long as we don't wipe
Christmas shirt,
ourselves
by
out.
the way, Matt.
Sorry?
It looks really good in the green screen. Your Christmas shirt looks
Yeah,
really good.
I wore this last year. It's the same problem, but you can see all the green is showing up in the green screen. I hope it's not too distracting for anyone. And yeah, I do need to fix the shadows here, but I need to set up extra lights, and that's gonna get to it. But yeah, there's no obligation for the universe to have to make sense to us. And the thing is, our brains did not evolve to understand cosmology. They
Which is exactly what Cosmic Carl
evolved
just said,
to
actually.
survive. Oh yeah, I think yeah. I hadn't actually read that message yet. Apart from reality is messy, so yeah, we evolved to survive on the plains in Africa. the savanna,
Yeah.
because they reckon that our upright walking started to evolve when the kind of the forests started becoming more sparse and turning into grasslands. Though the number of waves of Homo species, so human species, out of Africa was probably a lot more than we originally thought, and there were multiple waves throughout evolutionary history. But yeah, there was no requirement there for our brains to evolve to understand quantum mechanics or
And it didn't happen before. How many
relativity.
millions of years did we have life on this planet before brains started to get bigger? It took a long
Uh,
time.
okay, so life has definitely been around for at least 3.5 billion years. The Earth is about 4 billion years. Now they reckon at first they reckoned that the well, the Earth was too inhospitable to life in the really early Hadean period. Hadean because it comes from the Greek Hades, so sort of hellish. But there is some evidence to suggest that life may have started. The problem is that no rock formation lasts beyond 3.5 billion years. So the only thing we've got is small zircon crystals that maintain that actually have traces of organic material, which indicates there might have been life or at least something organic around, because organic doesn't necessarily mean life. It's carbon based, so hydrocarbons essentially. And yeah, but so life could be, and the evidence suggests it could be with the big could in there, about 3.8 billion years, and complex life started to develop around 600 million years ago. So you've got at least several billion years, or a couple of two and a
All we had
half
was
billion years
small
probably
cell clusters. It was the most we
before.
had was
Yeah, little bacterial colonies for most of it, and so most of the history of this planet has just been single
But
celled.
even once we got to more complex organisms, we had to get well into the later Triassic before you started seeing larger brained creatures start to really develop.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, Triassic, yeah. Although there is evidence of intelligence a bit before then, but yeah, the sort of intelligence that most mammals have is actually quite unusual. But
yeah,
birds are incredibly intelligent despite the size of a lot of their brains, and they're the descendants of dinosaurs. So it does indicate that a lot of dinosaurs are probably quite intelligent, or at least had the capability of being intelligent. But generally the hunters like that generally are, because it helps them hunt. Though there's not much evidence to suggest things like velociraptors ever hunted in groups. So there's another thing to have a go at Jurassic Park for. One, their velociraptors needed feathers. They're twice as big as they should be. An actual velociraptor is about the size of a turkey, and they were feathered. Yeah, they had nasty claws that hurt you, but you know, if it was Jurassic Park and you were being attacked by them, you just kick them.
Yeah, you might end up with a few lacerations.
It just imagine a turkey with slightly sharper claws and teeth. But also at that size, they'd probably run from you. And it's very likely that they didn't hunt in groups. I originally thought that because they're quite smart and they tended to nest in groups. But the stomach contents and eating behaviors, I have heard about papers that suggest that they probably were individualistic. There've been some amazing finds, but this is it's a hard one. But sorry, and also I have the question. So I should get to Jenny's as well. The old stomata fossils. I think if that's the bacterial ones that we're talking about, then about 3.5 billion. I think the oldest fossils are about 3.5 billion, because that's the oldest geologic formations that we've got where the rock hasn't been recycled. Because when the rock just doesn't last longer than that. So if there was some, they've been just destroyed by the Earth's cycling. And of course, over the years, there has been more continent mass formed up, because that's just the way geology works. It favors continental material, tends to be a bit lighter than like ocean materials. So they tend to float a bit, and then you can build up, but that still doesn't mean they last forever. So it's a complicated one. It's a complicated one, but I like it. SciShow does a really good video on the world's oldest fossils. So they do the stromata ones. Is where I'm getting my my information from. But they also do some of the oldest, like the vertebrates, the older shells, and there are new techniques being developed. Some of my favorite ones are to do with mass spectrometry, not spectroscopy, but spectrometry, because you're weighing things, where you can actually do chemical trace analysis of rocks to try and pick up what the environment was like. So we might actually get a better understanding of what life was like, what the actual environment was chemically like, despite the fact that we're looking at rocks that are billions of years old. I actually should probably do a video on one of them, because it's my favorite example of spectrometry being used, is to figure out that Dickinsonia was an animal, where they basically
we might end up with a better understanding of the original soup that life started in.
Possibly too. I don't. Again, we probably won't get quite that far back, but we could get far enough back to understand a lot more about why certain geological events in Earth's history happened. Because one of the things is that you often have to find direct evidence, and if we can actually look down at a much more detailed chemical scale, then we can actually get a lot more information out of it. But it's not an easy thing to do. But I see. Sorry, I'm just having a look through the chat while I do that. Jen, did you have anything else you want to add? Sorry, I like fossils.
No, I think you covered that.
Paleontology. Look, Cosmic Cult, I'm not going to flash those because I do tend to avoid theology, because I know that might bring in certain people, and I don't want the channel going down that route. But it is still an interesting point about human psychology that I will mention. It does seem to be a trend in at least human storytelling, if you look at some of the myths, where groups of people get simplified into individuals just because that's the way humans tell stories. So I think there's probably something to it in at least that aspect, but I'm not going to do too much detail because, as I said, I know a lot of people who come from that side of the community.
We had a big discussion about composite characters the other night on Purple Stream.
Yes.
So we actually already covered this in a different stream.
Yeah. No, look, it's fascinating. As I said, it's more of, and whilst I'd be happy with that one, I just know that some people do that. I've had, I think Atangelo has jumped in here once, but I think he got the idea very quickly. This is not a right channel. That
you're talking about the Yuri Miller experiments, Jenny.
I actually have someone I need to get back to on that. There was apparently there's an article I want to read from Nature, because they actually had a breakthrough with that this year. Miller Yuri about the kind of primordial soup. I don't really like primordial soup because it doesn't do justice to how complex the chemical environment was. And we're not talking about a little pond somewhere. We're talking about the entire Earth with a multitude of environments, and we have no idea which one. But we have narrowed it down.
Billions of years to try different. The planet had billions of years to try different experiments to get to life, and that's the thing.
Yeah, and here's the thing: when scientists say they don't have a clue, it's not the same as when a regular person says they don't have a clue. When scientists say they don't have a clue, they probably know 80 to 90% of it. They just can't answer the last 10%. Whereas when most people say they don't have a clue, it's because they can't answer the first 10%. And a similar one, actually, a nice analogy that I heard was also to do with magic tricks, because I was for a while into close-up card tricks and other magic tricks. If a layperson gets 10% of a trick, they will assume that they haven't been fooled. Whereas if a magician can't get 10% of a trick but gets 90%, they will think they've been fooled.
Talk to Penn and Teller about that one.
Yes, and I think that actually I heard that from someone who actually had fooled
I think
Penn
it was
and Teller.
it's something that Teller had actually said.
Yeah, and maybe it was. I've definitely heard it in the context.
Which is weird saying it's something that Teller said, considering Teller never talks on stage.
He does. He just doesn't do it as part of his magic acts. But it's interesting. I heard about why. It was because in his early days, he often performed for younger, like college audiences, and they used to heckle him. So he just did the whole thing in silence so that he didn't have to respond to assholes.
I did not know that.
And then it just became a thing. But I have heard his voice. He will talk. outside of that. I heard one of the documentaries they do, he talks very, very briefly, and they did do it for one of the. I'm not going to say which one because I'm not advertising, but they did do a lot of adverts on YouTube. That he was involved with. He did speak in that. So and he speaks in Big Bang Theory. He plays someone's dad. And I think he does failed magic tricks.
Yeah,
So
he plays Amy's dad.
it's part of his act that he doesn't. It's fascinating. No, the two of them are a very
They were
very
also
very interesting
both in
pair.
Babylon 5, where they did.
Oh, okay. Now I have to see this. I haven't seen Babylon 5.
They're on an episode of. I can't remember what their character names were, but they were comedians.
Okay.
And Teller did the visual humor, and Penn did the verbal humor, and Teller only spoke by using a horn that he beeped.
Oh, okay.
So it is interesting, but I can't remember what they were called in it. So,
okay. I also just forgot about the poll I'd made in the chat. So if anyone hasn't answered, please do that one. I was curious. So the Mars Climate Orbiter, I really want to end the poll now because it's 50-50. It just went from 50-something to 40-something. It just switched to 50-50. Okay. I think we're about to lose Cosmic Kyle and I know also a few others who are saying good evening. So to those who are about to leave, those who will leave soon or who have, my apologies if I haven't quite kept up with the chat. But also, yes, have a good evening because it is also now evening for me. Enjoy what's left of Christmas for you guys, wherever you may be. But yes, the poll just switched. We've got 13 votes. I'm going to end it now just because it has been going for a little while. So just slightly more, probably not statistically different from 50-50. The Mars Climate Orbiter was going back to our early conversation about slowing things down in orbit, was the time where they got that horribly wrong. So, as I'm sure everybody here is going to be familiar, the US, generally speaking, does not like to use SI or metric units. They like to use imperial units or US measurements, as some people call them, because no one else really uses them except, I think, Thailand is one of the... I think there's only a couple of other countries that actually are completely imperial. You get places that do a mix of them.
Thank you, Geof.
A weird mix. Yeah. And
Rebo and Zuti is the name of their characters in Babylon 5.
Oh, okay. Another reason to go watch it. I will have to do that at some point. The engineers, the engineering firm that built this, basically it was meant to be a satellite around Mars to monitor its climate, hence climate orbiter, and they refused to use SI units. They built it in Imperial, but NASA, being a scientific institution, uses, like the rest of the world, and what most people probably should, uses SI units. Now, there is a bit of a myth that it was just they forgot about this. They didn't. NASA knew this. They're not idiots. They work in America. They know that there's differences. So they wrote a program to convert the units because all of the detectors and everything on it were in Imperial, but of course they needed their systems to read it in metric. So they wrote a program to convert the units, but they got it wrong. They made a mistake in the program, so it didn't convert the units properly. And when they did try and put it in orbit around Mars, it kept reading that the velocity was too high. And they're like, it's 200 kilometers up. It should be X velocity because you know how fast they have to go for a certain orbit. This is actually fairly easy maths to do, particularly if you don't have an atmosphere. So they're like, okay, it's telling us we're going too fast. Slow it down. They weren't 200 kilometers up, though. They were 50. They slowed it down, and the thing just smashed straight into the surface of the planet. And in a matter of seconds, they lost several $100 million worth of work.
But it wasn't just that experiment they lost, because that was also taking the polar probes with it that they were going to...
they lost the whole
pole
thing.
regions and do like what's under the ice on the poles on Mars, and they lost everything.
Yeah, because somebody probably got into a little bit of trouble for that.
I would like to say this is why you check your work. It's why you run simulations before you send the good thing out, the final thing out. So, yeah, it's like
Yeah,
that
because it
somebody
was
didn't run simulations because they should have picked up this fault before it got that far.
yeah, but it's also why we should just the whole world should use the same way. I'm sure you're not, Jenny. I've had a kind of a bit of a watery eye watching physics documentaries, particularly astronomy documentaries. So, I've seen cartoons that have got me a bit emotional about the rovers and on Mars. So I'm almost certain that you're not. It's kind of a bit sad, but a bit cute too. I like how they kind of, particularly if you follow, let's say, Twitter or something, they like to give the robots a bit of a personality. I kind of like that. It makes the exploration a bit more human. I like it. I know it's not right. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I just saw the last message.
I read it as sultanas instead of santas, so that made it a totally different context.
Oh well. Also, it looks like we have a few new people too. At least we definitely have a Dr. Nimrod. Sorry, I am trying to keep track of the chat, but also talking a lot of science, and my brain races a bit. Yeah. So we have a bit over 20 minutes left before we will hand over to Geof, who is in the chat. But that means that I've still got more room for science questions. Okay, I did kind of hint at it before, but here we go. This one is definitely scientific. Okay, I study a specific area of spectroscopy, or two actually. At the moment, we're just starting a new section. One is called KEPAS, Quartz Enhanced Photoacoustic Spectroscopy. This is basically you can use a beam of light, in my case, a laser, to generate a sound wave, or at least modulation in pressure, which is essentially a sound wave, or it is a sound wave, in target gases, and then you can basically listen to them with a fancy microphone, in this case the tuning fork made of quartz, hence quartz enhanced photoacoustic, because you're making a acoustic signal out of that's generated from photons, from light. Spectroscopies, because we're basically doing gas detection. And the other one is fairly new. I can't really mention too much about it because for multiple reasons. To do with fiber Bragg grating, so it's to do with optical fibers and how you can use them for gas detection as well. And yeah, that one's new. So the first one is what I'll talk more on. As I was mentioning earlier, the reason I haven't made a video on it or spoken too much about it is that I hopefully want to wait until I'm getting towards the end of it, or I do finish, because it'll be easier when I finish. I'll actually have time to do a proper video on what it is. But it is a very niche area. There is very little out there on it because it's so niche, which does make it hard. So yeah, I can guarantee pretty much no one here would have heard of it. Maybe photoacoustic spectroscopy. I'd be very doubtful if someone was familiar with KEPAS here, just because it's such a niche area. Numbers, I'm happy to play those odds. But yeah, so basically gas detection for environmental monitoring. It's the summary. As I said earlier, I make methane sing with a laser. That's
like the fact that Jenny said your PhD is in cow herding.
We can do if I can get them working as suitable environmental detectors. We can actually monitor the methane output from cows. So you're not as wrong as you probably thought.
A laser at a cow's butt. Although, to be fair, you want to point it at their mouth because they burp more methane than they fart. So
yeah. Though it's not the laser part that's the problem, it's the electronics and the detection around it. The actual technology to get everything else is fine. It's the electronics. So yeah, hopefully you can make some progress in the next few months. I'm getting close to having a few advances that will be nice. But as I said, science is a slow and boring process. The findings are interesting, but yeah, it takes a long time to get anywhere in science, which is why PhDs are so long.
Yeah.
But of course, you can't expect everyone to have one. I don't think everyone should try and have one. It would be pointless. Oh, yeah, and just because someone has a PhD doesn't make them an expert in science. It makes them an expert in one tiny area of science. Just a reminder, because there are people out there with PhDs who say very stupid things. I'm sure I do, but at least I'll acknowledge that I'm capable of saying stupid things. Sorry?
All the time, especially when people talk way outside of their field.
Oh, yeah, Yes, it is a bit of a problem. So when someone says that, you should listen to me because, I'm a scientist, it should be what area of science that's all. That would be my first question. Someone's like, yeah, no, I know what I'm talking about. I'm a scientist. If
Hey,
I'm
Ring.
a bit curious, be like, oh yeah, Ring showed up. Was Ring here earlier? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
And a few people in and out, but yeah. Oh well. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, I'm trying to think. We've covered astronomy. We've done a bit of paleontology. We've done some chemistry.
We ended up doing fusion, which I said we would, but not the not the question I actually wanted.
Not quite, but
I think we sort of covered it around the edges, so I'm happy with
that. So we've done fusion, so energy generation. I'm trying to think what other areas.
FTL.
I mean, look.
No, not so much. Yeah, well, we did because we covered warp drive, so FTL. Near speed of light with ion drives and fusion rockets and various other ideas like solar sails.
Yeah, we've covered quite a lot. Yeah.
Well, we
And I'm trying to think. Biology, don't ask me much about biology. If it's not paleontology, it's biology to a physicist. I'll see if I don't know if I have a copy of that one. Let me see if I can track a copy of that meme down, because it does sum up the situation and it goes back to what we were talking about. Not necessarily going to be easy to find while I'm trying to run a few things.
Hey, Davros.
Oh, Davros is here. Hello.
There's somebody who should have joined us for the stream.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is still about 15 minutes left. If you want to join, send me a DM. I'll send you the link. Because you've been on for my science streams before. Or at least one of them. You did when we were doing one of the debunks for like the
Davros is.
Oh yeah, the protect you from 5G. So nah. Rest if invitations there if you want. No, don't feel any obligation to. Very good. But yeah, we do still have a bit left. Oh yeah, I think I found it. Let me sorry, I'm just setting this up in the background so when I actually share my screen, it makes a tiny bit of sense.
It is who married Jenny?
There we go.
To physicists, bird.
Well, see, Jenny, the problem with your question is it needs to be scientific.
Yeah.
Now there's the. Oh, there we go. Although we do now have a summit biology question. Where is it? This one. It is a tough one.
Ooh.
That
isn't human, I assume.
Yes. There are days where even if that wasn't a stipulation, it probably wouldn't change my answer. Well, there are some days you wake up and look at the news and go, why are we this stupid sometimes?
Water bears are adorable.
Actually, it's most days. They are. I don't think I'm as big of a fan of them as other people because I don't find them quite as cute. They are amazing little creatures.
Yeah.
But I mean, look, I'm a big paleontology nerd, so now I'm kind of racking through all of the creatures that used to live on this planet that I quite like. It would still probably be a vertebrate because.
What about the Quetzalcoatl? The
largest petrosaur. Yeah, that one's up there.
Petrosaur that ever existed. You're talking about a petrosaur that was the same size as a jumbo jet, basically. Imagine what
Yes.
how people would see if there was still if pterosaurs were still around now, and yes, or something like that flying in the sky.
Right, I'm just trying to find a picture of it so I can show it. Yeah, here we go. This one. Yeah, stood as tall as a giraffe and actually would have hunted on foot, but was still fully capable of flying and was capable of transatlantic journeys.
Yeah, and had a wingspan close to the smaller jets.
No, at least the wingspan of a Cessna. So yeah, was the size of an airplane and probably way more efficient. So his
look at that. Look at what is effectively their beak. Look, I mean, it's not a beak because they're not birds, but that's terrifying.
Yeah, you see, the interesting thing here with this is they're what's known, well, they're in the clade known as giant azhdarchids, who were all really insanely big pterosaurs. And this one here, the exact size is not 100% known, but it is inferred based on the bones that we have found compared to the kind of bone ratios that we find in other azhdarchids. So there is room for it to be slightly different either way, but they are reasonably confident in a rough size.
Yeah.
But the interesting things is that one of the reasons that all of the pterosaurs died out and none of the birds did is that if you look at the end of the Cretaceous, so Cretaceous is the end of the Cretaceous when the asteroid came and did a tiny bit of changing to the Earth's biosphere, the smallest pterosaurs were about the size of the largest birds. What actually seemed to have happened is that birds had pushed into the niche that pterosaurs originally occupied. And so to keep surviving, pterosaurs had evolved to fill a new niche by getting bigger. And so they were the bigger sky flyers and then the birds were the smaller ones. So when the asteroid hit, the birds had a bigger advantage. They were smaller. They didn't need the food that something like this would have needed because they're close enough to dinosaurs, although they're not a dinosaur. I want to make that clear, that they would have had a very, very fast metabolism. That's birds do. And that's why pretty much no avian dinosaurs survived to this day. Some of them did actually. Some non-avian dinosaurs survived the asteroid, the initial impact, but not enough of them to keep going, and so they died out. So in the relative period afterwards. Oh, I like this one. So mainly because I think this one is actually going about the myth of where the name comes from. It's one of the Aztec gods, and it was the big gods, so they named it after that.
Creature.
Yes.
Pterosaurs are amazing creatures anyway.
Yes. Oh, yes. And don't forget, Jeff's just put the link there. I will put it up again when we get close to the end. But yes, after this one, we are handing over to Geof for a bit more Christmas fun. Probably going to be a little different. I imagine this channel's a little different to most of the others on the stream, although I've seen the lineup.
And
we've got a very, very interesting
on Jeff's one because I think people get afraid when they get the thing that we're going to be asked science questions. Maybe I better not hop in this stream. But
I mean, they could hop on this one and just ask me the questions. And
that's true.
I mean, we all know things that other people don't. Trust me, there's a lot of here that I'm just like, yeah, I don't know everything. So yeah.
Here's an interesting thing about pterosaurs, though. We don't know because there is evidence of some dinosaurs being feathered. We do know that some of the young chicks I'm calling them chicks. I'm not even sure if that's the right term for pterosaurs. Did have a downy type cover. It is possible that some of the pterosaurs were feathered. They weren't feathers like birds have.
Yeah, they were a convergent evolution.
Yeah,
So,
it's a convergent
birds have this
evolution.
nice kind of like even pattern to the feathers, where the kind of this it kind of grows and then you get them coming out. Whereas the pterosaurs, I think, were offset. Though it was a different way of doing feathers,
Doing it,
but
yeah.
both evolved from the sort of downy fur, weird downy fur. The weird thing is that kind of like fluffy stuff you see on some of dinosaurs is known as dino fuzz. It's the scientific name for it, apparently. So there we go. You can actually call it dino fuzz, and you're not being unscientific. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, Ring's got the feathered serpent was probably the biggest god in Mesoamerica.
That's what made me think of the fact that some
Yeah.
pterosaurs were actually likely feathered. Well, they were definitely feathered early on. That type of feather. Whether they kept their feathers in later life is what we're not sure about. So we don't know if pterosaurs flew with feathers or if they only had them as young chicks to keep them warmer. But it's still interesting.
It is, and it's one thing that always keeps getting me when you watch back now. Like, say, The Walking with Dinosaurs is probably the best example. I did watch a couple of when a paleontology channel went back and kind of did a review of them based on what we know now. And it's kind of interesting the things they got right and wrong and what they should have known at the time. But yeah, that's one thing that everyone keeps saying is that a lot of the dinosaurs needed to be fluffier. They're not lizards. They don't look like lizards.
Oh, they're definitely not lizards.
And if you want one here, go look up the images that have emus or other things like ostriches, the bigger flightless birds, rendered with the same kind of shrink wrapping with the sort of skin texture as the way that you render a dinosaur based on the fossil. And yeah, you'll just realize how damn similar they are. So yeah, it's most dinosaurs had feathers because it looks like at least some of the earliest ancestors had at least some primitive fluff on them.
Well, I mean, to be honest, both feathers and skin are a variation of scales.
Yeah, some mammals have scales. They actually do.
Well,
rats
technically,
and
skin
mice,
is a type of scales.
Well, yeah, it's at least developed from it, but I'm talking about like actual scales. Look
actual
at
scales,
rat and mice have them on their tails. It's nowhere near the same degree as our aquatic ancestors did, or at least at one point. Because I'm deliberately not
many
using
birds
the term
have
fish,
them on their feet, so.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, and and a lot of dinosaur fossils have been found with feathers. So we know most of them had feathers. Sauropods less so because we've actually found skin texture. So the big ones like the Brontosaurus and the Titanosaurs, which are even bigger versions. Brontosaurus apparently, it means thunder lizard, something like that. I find it quite cool. Is that we have actual preserves of their skin, so we know they didn't have feathers, at least as adults. But when you look at, so particularly the raptors or the other sides, you got the sauropods. Sorry, I'm trying to think back to all the branches. Sorry, this is not my area of expertise. But the ones that sort of lead to the raptors and the tyrannosaurs, etc. We know that branch was
you got
very,
like the sauropods
very
and
feathered.
The hadrosaurs and the
the
avian style, the raptors and things like that, which are more your avian style dinosaurs, and which led to the birds of it, as you said.
Sorry, I'm trying to see if I can get. Nope. Let's.
And then you got the ceratopsids, which are like Triceratops and that.
Sauropodomorpha, I cannot pronounce these.
Diapsids and
Sauriscia. So you get going towards the sort of like the Triceratops, the Centrosaurs, the Stegosaurs, which is like damn it, I can never pronounce the last part of it. Then you get the sauropods. So again, like the big plant eaters, the titanosaurs, the Diplodocus, And then you get the Saurischian, which is what leads to the raptors, the tyrannosaurs, and the apes. You were entertained earlier, but you seem to like lasers and apples. Maybe I should talk about the history of apples.
You need to do a video now where you laser an apple. Just the stall.
If I had a powerful enough one, then maybe. But
see, write graffiti in an apple with a laser.
I don't actually have a laser powerful enough to do that. I'd have to get one, and it's not exactly easy. Thanks, Davros. Geof will be on in 4 minutes, so don't worry if you're bored. You don't have long left. But yeah, we got to. Currently, I think this is the peak views here at 25, right at the end. But yeah, this is. I know we got a lot of people because it's part of the marathon stream, but I think this is one of the highest number of concurrent viewers I've ever had on this channel for a live stream. So I do want to take the opportunity again to thank everyone for joining. It's since we have a few minutes left, is that and also
we haven't done this for such a long time. I've missed this.
Yeah, I love to just talk science every now and then. And look, I'm going to be really busy, so my schedule, future for my channel is going to be quite hard for me to do produced videos. But I am thinking of trying to set up, and it'll have to depend on how next year goes because PhD is getting insane because of course it does, and that's just part of the course. But if I can, I will try and set up a regular time to stream. It might be fortnightly. I'm thinking of doing a regular kind of Q&A session with maybe where I'll do a science thing from the week. Again, it depends how much time I have to actually put in beforehand, but it'll be at least a semi-regular Q&A session like this. And I will probably also do slightly more regular debunk streams because some of those can be fun. So it might be we've still got to do 2012, the movie 2012.
No, we do.
And there's a few things that people have said out there that are stupid. Again, I'm thinking more scientific debunking.
I have to save my 2012 story until we actually do the movie. But
yeah, that will happen. I will get Mero back on. And by the way, if anyone's seen Mero, she's on after Geof. So come there. It'll come back there. So, all right. We have 2 minutes left. Jen, do you have anything you wish to?
I really don't have anything else to add. No, I'm not showing.
Okay, well, that's worked pretty well. I mean, look, if there's any last question, then
I'll let you answer it so you don't get too sidetracked.
You're assuming I won't get sidetracked, which I think is an unsafe assumption to make.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah.
Everos just said, "Can a limousine outrun an earthquake?"
No, that's not how plate tectonics work.
There
you go. I answered it. All right, next one. Let's rapid fire these. I want more. Come on. I like these ones. Don't worry. We will go through 2012. But okay. Oh yes. I will also do this too while I'm here. I know Geof is posting it, but I'm going to do it as well. Hopefully this link also works. Although I think Geof can post links here. I'm going to post that. So just put here is that one here. I'm just going to also test it that it works. Yep, it does. Now, if you're watching this from the actual Christmas marathon, then it should just tick over. But I am going to see if I can pin this one. Pin message. There you go. The pinned message now is the link to Geof's stream. So when I finish here. Oh, we
about
do?
non-Newtonian fluids.
Oh. I would say you had a better chance if you're running because then you're pushing more. The non-Newtonian fluids, you would probably stand a chance.
Mythbusters did this.
Oh, I haven't seen that episode. I've seen a lot of Mythbusters.
Actually did this. So I'm not going to spoil it. Go look up the video on YouTube, but Mythbusters actually did this. You could probably maintain it for a short amount of time, but eventually you because it's so hard to run on the custard or the non-Newtonian fluid that you built, you will eventually lose momentum, and that will stop you compressing the non-Newtonian fluid. So you will eventually sink.
Yeah.
Can you run on it for a couple of steps? Probably.
Yeah,
But
my
watch
theory
their video.
was
They actually tested it.
yeah, if it's a short enough distance, you'd be fine. But as soon as that distance started to get a
They
bit
also did
long, you're in
swimming in a
trouble.
non-Newtonian fluid.
That'd be interesting. I wonder if you'd have more luck with something like breaststroke than like freestyle or something.
Go watch the video.
Oh, thank you, Stork.
All right.
Anyway,
So we should
that
pass
has
over
hit
to Geof.
over now. According to the clock, I have a few seconds left. But yes, I'm going to say farewell to everyone, and I will see you all over
Bye,
on
everyone.
Geoff's streams. Have a good Christmas. Have a good evening, night, morning, wherever you may be. And remember, be like a proton and stay positive.
Bye.